The Esperance region is home to some of the oldest and most unique historical buildings in Western Australia. These buildings tell of the dramatic change that the colonial period brought to the land. Stories of community and conflict, tragedy and hope, and stories of survival in some of the most unlikely places. Imagine a grand homestead in the middle of nowhere, an oasis in a fertile valley surrounded by unfamiliar and arid land, hundreds of miles from the nearest town. This was Lynburn Station, Campbell Taylor's bold gamble, taking a chance on land that seemed so inhospitable and isolated. It became the first pastoral lease to the east of Esperance, a haven and important port of call for new arrivals seeking to establish their own farms and stations in the area. Built in 1872, Lynburn Homestead is the second oldest building still remaining in the Esperance region. It's been home to many significant characters from our past. Lynburn Station is located on land that has been home to the Wudjari Nyungar people for tens of thousands of years. The Thomas River, which flows past the homestead, is a significant cultural corridor for the Wudjari people as they historically travelled along it from the coast to further inland. From the 1840s, European pastoralists began to spread out from the Albany area, taking up the land that was most suitable for pasturing sheep. These pastoralists began to arrive on Wudjari Nyungar land in the 1860s and 1870s, employing Nyungar people as guides and stockmen as they got established in the area. Lynburn was the first pastoral station to be established to the east of Esperance Bay. Doc Reynolds is a Wudjari elder and senior cultural advisor.
There was a lot of goodwill by a lot of early settlers to try and interact with the Aboriginal people and to learn their ways and their customs, because the Aboriginal people were pivotal in ensuring that they were able to open up their land and to be able to traverse through the country without any fear or harm, because the Nyungar people could converse with common words from here right across to the west coast. Our people at the time, they would have seen it as a bit of an oppressive regime. They were inflicting all these alien ideas onto which they weren't used to. You know what I mean? Because their free style of living and what have you is that they were only looking after themselves in a way that they've done for thousands and thousands of years. So when colonisation happened and started impacting, we had to adapt to those pressures.
Lynburn was built by Campbell Taylor, an Albany man who had grown up on a property called Candyup on the Calgon River. His mother was Mary Bussell, from the family that Busselton is named for. His father was Patrick Taylor, who came from a wealthy Scottish family. Patrick and Mary met on the James Patterson, the ship that brought them both to Australia. Patrick settled in Albany and married Mary in 1836. They went on to have 6 children. By 1870, Campbell was ready to leave his father's property and set out on his own. Although there were only a handful of settlements scattered along the coast between Albany and Esperance Bay, Many of the places suitable for grazing sheep were already taken, so Campbell went further east, applying for a lease of land around the Thomas River, and in 1871 he moved a flock of sheep to his new landholdings. The lease included 125 acres of freehold land for the homestead site and a surrounding pastoral lease of 100,000 acres. The following year, he began to build a homestead on the site, which he called Lynburn. The homestead building was constructed from locally quarried stone with a mud mortar. The walls were almost 2 feet thick. The roof beams were made from local yate timber, and the roof was originally made of thatched river rushes. The homestead was extended over time to include a kitchen, sitting room, 4 bedrooms, a cellar, and a veranda. They also built a large stone reservoir for water and a channel to collect the water, which is still in place today. In 1874, a large shearing shed was built near the homestead from river stones. These buildings still stand today in a beautiful fertile valley close to the Thomas River in the area now known as Cape Arid. Lynburn Homestead was built with the assistance and labour of the local Wudjari Nyungar people. The Taylor family had been on good terms with the Nyungar people who lived near their Albany property, and Campbell grew up with the Menang people as his companions. At Thomas River, he was reportedly well regarded by the local Wudjari Nyungar people and regularly employed them to work at Lynburn as stockmen and shearers.
We believe that there was an amicable type relationship in a trying circumstances.
A visitor to Lynburn recalled many years later that this station was worked by a great staff of natives, about 100 of them. After Campbell Taylor settled in the Cape Arid area, several other families followed, such as the Ponton brothers and John Sharp in 1873 and the Brooks family in 1874. Henrik Dimer, who'd jumped ship from a whaling vessel near Albany, later joined the community as well. Campbell supported these people when they first arrived, helping them to get established. They would often borrow supplies from each other, especially as they were frequently waiting for months in between the ships that brought new supplies or mail. In 1876, the newly built telegraph line reached Israelite Bay, and a telegraph station was built there, which brought more new people to the area to work as linesmen and telegraph operators. In 1877, Campbell's father Patrick died, and he inherited Candiup. This led to a lot of travel between Thomas River and Albany for Campbell, a distance of more than 500 kilometres. Of course, he was travelling on horseback through uncleared land with no roads, an exhausting journey he would have had to undertake many times. In 1883, Campbell married Charlotte Gresham, a governess from Melbourne. She was an accomplished painter who had trained as an artist at the National Gallery of Victoria. Charlotte moved into Lynburn and joined the growing community of people in the area. Eventually, managing both properties proved to be too much, and in 1887, Campbell decided to try and sell Lynburn. In 1893, life began to change rapidly in the south of Western Australia as gold was discovered at a place called Fly Flat, which would later be called Coolgardie. When the gold rush began, many of the stockmen that pastoralists like Campbell relied on went to seek their fortunes in the goldfields. This changed the way they ran their properties. Without stockmen, Campbell had to borrow money to put up fences around his property. As men poured into the region to seek their fortunes in the goldfields, Esperance very quickly became a bustling town. Then, in 1900, tragedy struck. Campbell and Charlotte set out for Esperance to cast their votes in the Federation referendum held on the 31st of July 1900. They were travelling with a companion, a young Aboriginal man, probably one of the workers on the station. Along the journey, the cart hit a stump and overturned. While Charlotte and the young man travelling with them were thrown clear, the cart fell on Campbell, injuring him severely. Charlotte sent the young man back to Lynburn for help. When they received the telegram, Willie Dempster and Laurie Sinclair set out immediately from Esperance in a boat. Campbell was carried to the coast on a stretcher, a distance of about 3 miles, where he was picked up in the boat and transported to Esperance, arriving the same night. His injuries were very serious, so Campbell was put on a steamship for Albany. Sadly, he died 2 weeks later. He was 57. After Campbell's death, Charlotte inherited the station and managed it herself for a time, but due to declining wool production, Lynburn was not making much return, and Charlotte advertised the station for sale again with 6,000 sheep in October 1900. The station did not sell, and the bank foreclosed on the loan in 1901. Charlotte went back to Melbourne, where she made a living as a writer and painter. The station was purchased by Sir James Lister for £2,900 in 1902 and was managed and later inherited by Lister's daughter and son-in-law, Marion and Alex Turnbull. One of the couple's children, Alexander Phipps Turnbull, was a Rhodes Scholar and studied law at Oxford University in 1907. Phipps, as he was called, enlisted in the army in 1914. He was in the 10th Light Horse Regiment and wrote frequent letters home to his family. Tragically, Phipps Turnbull was killed in Gallipoli in 1915. His family, completely devastated by his death, left Lynburn soon after, leaving much of their furniture and linen behind. After the Turnbull family left Lynburn, the station changed ownership several times. It was then taken up by Louis and Dorothy Chopin and partner Walter Dimer in 1932. Dorothy was the granddaughter of Stephen Ponton, one of the early European settlers in the area. The Chopins moved to Lynburn with their 4 children, Amanda, Billy, Neil and Ross. Marnie Back and Helen Newman, the daughters of Amanda, or Nell Choppin as she was known, have compiled their mother's writings about her time there.
Oh yeah. Oh, good one, huh? This is my mother, Amanda Nell. I had lived with my family on my great-uncle's station at Balladonia, which my great-grandfather Stephen Ponton had founded with his brother William. We first came to Lynburn on a summer holiday in 1930. The property had been abandoned for some years at that time. Our family, with Walter and Fred Dimer, came to Thomas River and surrounding coastal areas again in 1931 for our annual holiday from Balladonia. My father Louis Choppin and mother Dorothy Nee Beju must have liked the place, as they decided with Walter Dimer in partnership to pool stock and take up the property. So with father, mother, sister Billy and younger brothers Neil and Ross, we left Balladonia in May 1932 in our old Hudson car with Billy's cats and our dog Paddy, and motored off into the sunrise and started our new life. Lynburn Station was situated in a very pretty setting of deep valleys. It was as though approximately 10 square miles of sand plain had collapsed and left dark rich soil in its place. We had to live off the land for a start. Wild ducks, tamars, roos and turkeys were very plentiful. The sea was only 4 distance from Lynburn. My mother, Dad, Billy, Walter and Tom were wonderful fishermen, and there were also lovely big fish in the Thomas River. Our dad wasn't long in establishing a lovely vegetable garden, and with all the rains every few days during winter and spring, everything thrived. So with veggies, melons, strawberries and fruit trees, we made all our jams, pickles and chutney. We were fairly poor, but we led a happy life. The bird life was wonderful, and so were the glorious wildflowers of every description. We honestly thought we were living in paradise. It was hard work clearing the new land. We only cleared 5 acres first. The men burnt the wattle which covered the valleys. Camels pulled all the big yate trees into heaps, which were then burnt. Ploughing done by horse and a single farrow plough, and with just the ashes were used for fertiliser. Because the ground was so fertile, the crops grew nearly 5 foot tall. They loved it. It was isolated, but they had a lot of visitors. People came down from the goldfields and they all came to Lynburn, and they must have had a tennis court, Helen.
They did, they made their own tennis court.
Yeah, they had.
Landhills.
Because our grandfather was the champion tennis player. Everyone came and they had wonderful parties and they went fishing, and yeah, they were very happy there. And our grandmother, Dorothy, was a brilliant horsewoman. She was one of the first women that wouldn't go side saddle. She wore her pants.
She rode astride.
So did Mum and Auntie Billy. She could put a hand to anything. She made her own wedding dress. Look at the dress. And the wedding day. And she was a very good shot with the gun. We lived in the saddle nearly every day of our lives out there, mustering cattle and horses, keeping them away from poison patches, bringing wild brumberries from the Cape Arid area and breaking them in. My sister Billy and I did our own dressmaking with the help of our mother. There was a number of balls in Esperance, say maybe once or twice a year. The 2 lovely ladies made their dresses, rolled their lovely ball gowns into their saddlebags and rode their horses by themselves. It took them 2 days, but they stopped at Hannet's at Duns Rocks on the way. They would go to the ball, have a great time, and then pack their ball dresses back again and go back to Thomas River and start working again.
The Chopin family lived at Lynburn until 1938, when they moved into Esperance. Walter and Sydney Dimer, two of Henry Dimer's sons, purchased the station in 1948. Over the years, the buildings were unused and fell into disrepair. After the Israelite Bay Telegraph Station was closed, the population in the area had dwindled. By this stage, Lynburn was nearing 80 years old, already a respectable age for a building constructed from humble materials. In 1958, Jeff and Pauline Brewer purchased Lynburn Station from the Dimers.
We went out to Israelite Bay in 1957, and on the way back home we saw this track leading to the southwest. And I'd heard about Thomas River Station, and I thought this track may lead there. So we headed down there and came to the beautiful valleys of the Thomas River, and went further along these tracks until we came to the old homestead, which was a thatched roof stone homestead with a shearing shed. The shearing shed at that time had no roof because the iron had been taken off the roofs anyway and used in Esperance for tin fences.
And the house was covered with this beautiful
Hemlock.
hemlock. So you could hardly see it. It was very tall hemlock.
Oh,
You had
pretty
to
high,
hack
probably.
yourself through to go into the old homestead.
Well, the whole scene was lovely. It's lovely undulating country and a river running at the bottom of it.
Beautiful trees, yate trees. It was so pretty.
We decided to investigate if we could buy this place. I was in the Department of Agriculture and couldn't get a CP block, so I had to get a freehold block, and that was freehold, 125 acres. We went to the real estate agent and he said, it's for sale, £500. £500 was a lot of money to me. It was half a year's salary. Anyway, a year's time they came back to us and said, we'll sell it for $350, and that's when we bought it.
It wasn't livable. There's no running water, no bathroom, shower, or anything like that. Very, very
It was a
rough.
place to camp, and we did that, but
Yeah.
I built a shearing shed and we hired a caravan and lived in the caravan. Spent most of the week out there and came in on the weekends. It still had a roof, but it was only a few years later, and a bushfire supposedly burnt through that country and set the thatch on fire. But we believe another story that was a bit different to that. There were people camped in it, and we think they might have lit a fire inside that house, and of course the sparks went up and caught the thatch. And then the house deteriorated markedly.
The couple were eager to restore and preserve Lynburn Station.
We could see a potential of developing those buildings and patching them up and getting them back to livable standard again. The Heritage Council agreed to support us in developing the house, and cleaning it all up and getting it going again. And we put a lot of money into that, and they contributed government funds as well.
But the main thing was to put the roof on to stop the building decaying.
In 1980, they re-roofed the stone shed, which was in danger of collapsing. In 1986, the Commonwealth Service Volunteers Scheme sent a team of volunteers to help restore the historic building under the supervision of builder John Crawley.
I started the foundations, but my work wasn't up to the standard of the people who came and did the work later on. They pulled all my work to pieces. It was holding it together, but it wasn't.
You made a muck
brilliant.
of it.
No, it was all cemented together, but not nice and neat. But there's still more work to do. There's
Lots of work.
lots of work still to do to bring it up to a livable standard, which would be great to do.
In 2005, Lynburn Station was State Heritage listed in response to Jeff and Pauline's lobbying. The State Heritage Council then contributed to some of the costs of maintaining the building. After Jeff was diagnosed with cancer, the couple had to make the difficult decision to sell the property that they had poured so much work into, farming the land for many years, saving the homestead building and planting many fruit trees, which are still flourishing today.
It broke my heart actually to sell Thomas because I couldn't do it physically with my illness. Couldn't carry on, couldn't do physical work.
The property is now owned by Stephen and Michelle Fowler, farmers from Condingup, who are continuing to run the farm. The stately homestead, with its surrounding fruit trees, stands proudly amidst canola fields and sheep paddocks. It has been a bustling homestead, a haven for new arrivals to the area, and a home to the families who have built their lives here. Even though time has taken its toll, thanks to the Brewer family, these gracious old buildings are still standing. Lynburn is a memorial to those who have lived and worked here, and a testament to their strength and determination throughout the years.